Hey everyone, it's Natalie Bencavanga, and welcome to a very special Facts Over Fear. I'm really excited to have my guest with me today, attorney and former state representative here in Pennsylvania, Conor Lamb. Conor, it's been a wild ride. I've known you a very long time, both personally and professionally, and it is great to reconnect with you. So thank you so much for being here.
You too, and congrats on all the success you're having with this platform. It's been great to
Oh,
watch.
oh my gosh, you're very kind. I was about to say the same to you, my friend, but we have a lot to talk about because you've had such an interesting political journey. The last time you were sort of in the, let's say, the spotlight of it all, I think the political landscape here in Pennsylvania looked a hell of a lot different than it does now. It was 2022. The Senate primary was a wild one on the Democratic side. John Fetterman was coming off of this massive surge, and you ultimately lost. But I think there are probably a lot of things that you have learned from that experience, especially as you look ahead to where the world is in this moment. Pennsylvania has changed. Fetterman has changed. And after some time away from elected office, you've had a chance to step back and reflect on the past and what happens next. So today on Facts Over Fear, we're going to do a little bit of both. What did you learn? Where do you stand on the issues now? Has anything changed for you just having watched you grow? And also seeing you at one of the No Kings rallies, perhaps it was last year. I was really inspired by you, I will say, on how you spoke on the issues impacting the working people of Pennsylvania. So let's talk a little bit about 2022. Do you think your political instincts or interests have changed since that moment?
I think instincts, yes. I think the way that I try to talk to people, the way that I try to address issues is a lot different now.
Hmm.
Um, Back then, I think because I had been in Washington for a few years, I was a little bit stuck in this dichotomy of kind of what part of the Democratic Party you're in. And I had a very honest theory based on my own experiences that, a certain quote type of Democrat would be able to win a Senate election, hold a Senate seat, and therefore accomplish a lot of the goals that we all have. And so a lot of my campaign ended up being about that, like sort of instead of being about me and John as people and our ideas and letting people get to know me as a person, I sort of became a stand-in for like Biden/Manchin, and Fetterman was a stand-in for kind of Bernie and the people who were dissatisfied. And that was just a bad dynamic for me because it didn't make it about the things that I care about the most, which is trying to help people and do good public service and take on all the injustices that we see. So I would definitely have to do that part of it over again very differently.
No, but I really appreciate that because I think it's really hard to take a look at our own story, right? And try to analyze it and put the ego aside. And that's why I thought it was really refreshing, like I said, when I saw you on the No King stage, because you just seemed looser. You just had, I think you were wearing like a t-shirt or a long sleeve shirt, not a button down. You had khakis on. You were out there like just saying the things. And I was just really proud, I think, to witness that evolution because we don't always experience that with politicians. There's a lot of doubling and tripling down sometimes on, like you said, it wasn't even about your platform. It was just how you were approaching the platform. So if you could go back to that time, what would you tell yourself to do? Or would you tell yourself to do anything differently?
Yeah, I think I would do a lot of things differently. First of all, you'd have to ask, like, was I even smart to run for that in the first place? Because
Mm.
Fetterman was really extremely popular, and
Hmm.
Democratic voters just wanted him to ascend to that seat at the time. Obviously, people feel differently now, and I think I misjudged that. Like, I think I misjudged whether the job was even really available, and so I was kind of fighting uphill the whole way. But even apart from all that, like, even if I was
Hmm.
going to run and lose again, like I just wish it would have been maybe a little bit more authentic of a campaign. And I wish I would have found a way to show what I was really doing every day. Like when you see, Beto O'Rourke was a good example of someone who was like always holding his phone with him, and you'd see him doing all these town halls all around
Hmm.
Texas, driving to small towns where Democrats didn't go to before and stuff. I was actually doing that every day, but I wasn't really finding a way to convey that digitally, especially so that people saw how hard I was working and that I was a more grassroots type of candidate than they might have realized. So that's a strategic question. You have to figure out how to film stuff like that and convey it to an audience. So that's a big thing I think I would do differently is just try to give it more of that grassroots feel that I feel like I was earning with my own work ethic, but not really showing.
So let's move into the present moment. So you've been traveling around Pennsylvania. I've seen you talking to voters in different spaces and just reconnecting with different communities here across the region. And like I said, I mentioned the No Kings rally that I saw you speak at. And I was surprised in I would say, very positive way, in the very direct, unapologetic language you were using to call out genocide, to call out what ICE was doing, standing up for, healthcare rights. What about that moment in your mind made you say, I want to get up, I want to speak, and I want to speak to who I am today?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that was April or no, either March or April of 2025. And
Mm-hmm.
Trump had been in office for about 2 months. And that was really the first time in about 3 years that I had been invited to something like that. And I had spent the first 2 or 3 months of the Trump administration being horrified like everybody was, especially being in the legal profession. If you remember,
Yeah.
some of the big law firms were one of the first ones to cave and start bending the knee to Trump and offering him all this free legal work so he wouldn't bar them from federal buildings and stuff. And it just was bothering me so much that they were not having courage or honor or the things that I learned about in the Marines, the kind of things that a leader should have. And, these are really privileged people, whereas people who are working every day and are not privileged are the ones that are really going to bear the burden of what Trump's going to do. And so I just felt ethically like I should try to speak up for people like that if I was given the chance. And the organizers of that rally called me and gave me the chance.
Have you changed your position on anything like focused on healthcare, focused on surveillance and privacy? Some of these issues weren't even trigger points at the time when you were running, but can you share a little bit with the audience on some of the things that you might have said, hey, I might have thought this then, but now I'm definitely more in this area?
I think it might be a little bit more of a question of emphasis.
Mm-hmm.
The things that we try to do, especially once Biden got elected and we had a workable majority in Congress and we had him, there were a lot of good ideas, infrastructure and trying to fight for different economic things. We did bring the price of healthcare down to the lowest level ever. And we
Mm-hmm.
had the lowest uninsured people that we've had in the 21st century. Um, but it obviously didn't get it done for people with inflation being what it is. And it didn't really do anything to offset the big inequality in our country that everybody knows about. So this year, the share of income earned by people who work every day for a salary is the lowest it's ever been in out of the whole national pie. And the share of corporate profits is the highest it's ever been. And if you would have told me 8 years ago, this stuff you guys are doing is not going to shift the balance at all, I would have really considered like how aggressive we should be. So I mean, that's one thing I take away from it is the measures we were calling for, while well intentioned and good, were just not strong enough, and we didn't put them in a lasting enough way to kind of overcome what's happening in the economy.
Do you believe that we need healthcare for all at this point? Medicare for all?
We definitely need health care for all. I'm still a bit of a critic of the Medicare for all idea, really from the standpoint of what is accomplishable in a country where more than 200 million people have private health insurance. And that's where,
Hmm.
I might be the skunk at the garden party a little bit, but you have to remember I've represented areas where Democrats are kind of outnumbered. And I have a little bit of a hard time seeing all these people who have private insurance and are relatively satisfied with it kind of giving that up. So I think you've even seen AOC, for example, this year start to talk about Medicare for all who want it and the existence of a public option that people
Hmm.
gradually buy into. I think that is like a fantastic idea because it gives you a little bit of what you want, which is access for people without necessarily upsetting the entire apple cart at once.
Connor, who are these people that like their private health insurance? I'm dying to know them.
80% of people pretty reliably tell pollsters that they're satisfied with their private health insurance when it comes to the quality. They have issues with price, everybody
Yeah.
does, but generally people say they want to keep it and they rate it as excellent or good. And that's one of the things that you see. As much as they will critique the system, a lot of people don't want to give up what they have, and that's
That's
always an
fair.
obstacle in politics that you have to keep in mind.
No, I appreciate that. What about paid leave for all? That's something here in Pennsylvania that is so close to crossing the finish line, in particular with the Family Care Act. Are these sort of kitchen table issues that you've been hearing from constituents or just people in your own community and network? Because they talk a lot about on the left this concept around affordability. But I think for me, the critique has always been, what does that mean? What are the policies that actually create an affordable society? And to your point, a public option, healthcare for all, Medicare for all, whatever we want to call it, that's an affordability issue. The same thing with, a paid leave or subsidized childcare. What do you think about these sort of grand statements, but then the actual policies that are behind them?
Yeah, I think first of all, we have to make a lot of progress on paid leave, especially, it's just unbelievable. These Republicans like JD Vance who talk about how people need to have more kids and then they don't want to do anything to support the young people out there who have literally no leave to take kids, or a bare minimum that wouldn't be good enough or not what you would do in your own family if you could. The issue of affordability, I think that one of the tasks we have to accomplish as Democrats is to sort of face up to the public that not every price is directly within our control. Like if we
Mhm.
all ran for Congress this year and next year saying we're going to lower the prices at your grocery store, that's not really a very honest thing to do. Like grocery store prices don't directly respond to congressional legislation like that. They can over the long run. But in the short term, like there are big ticket prices that we really can directly control. And I would say that those are energy. You mentioned childcare.
Mhm.
Obviously, health insurance premiums are a big one. How much
Mhm.
you pay for either school proactively or student debt retrospectively. Those are four. There are some others you put on that list. Every one of those could be changed in a day by a significant piece of congressional legislation. All things that most Democrats support. And so I think if we could focus the public on the things that we know we can influence and say, if your health insurance is $100 a month less expensive next year because we put back in the ACA subsidies, that gives you a little bit of flexibility to deal with what's happening with gas and groceries as we work on those too.
So let's talk a little bit about the sort of, I'm seeing more of the infighting within the Democratic Party. We saw this sort of years ago as we watched, MAGA infiltrate and overtake the Republican Party, or what's ever left of it, or whatever we want to call it these days. But there does seem to be a divide happening on the Democratic side. You have sort of this, old school establishment Democrat energy. Then you've got this the Democratic Socialists, the progressive wing of the party, and the establishment has told a lot of people, publicly, like, vote blue no matter who. But then as some of these Democratic Socialists are winning, that seems to be now upsetting these more established Democrats. Do you find that there could be this happy medium, or do you see the same thing happening where this might just sort of crack in half? How do we get back to sort of focusing on taking back the House and the Senate in an effective way? Because at the end of the day, I do believe these two pieces of the party still want a lot of the same things.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're having a very necessary debate about how we want to approach the future. It's very different than we were in 2018 when I came in, and everyone thought Trump was kind of a one-off or a fluke at that time. So the strategy was kind of, nominate a bunch of public service people who were in the military, who were kind of American flag apple pie types, and we'll reassure the public, we'll get Trump out of there, and we'll all sort of move on. And it seemed like it was heading that way. I mean, I remember when the election was called for Biden in 2020, just kind of taking a breath and going, "We did it," and not realizing at that point that what Trump represented was truly permanent and durable, and that all he had done was kind of sidetrack from it for a few years. And so now, that it is obvious that what he represents is here to stay, even if he's not here to stay. Uh, that has raised a lot of kind of uncomfortable questions for us that we just have to confront. We dodged them in 2024, the way that presidential thing was handled on the Democratic side, and now we have to have them. I think our party should be proud of having disagreements like this out in the open. We don't have one authoritarian figure like Trump and his sons are in their party. So it's going to be chaotic for a while. It's funny, my reaction to the El Sayed win is as I've actually been impressed how many establishment Democrats have like very quickly tried to send
Hmm.
signals of rallying around him. Obama calls him and
Hmm.
Kamala endorses him and that sort of thing. Um, But the brutal reality of it is that you have to win these winnable races. And if you look at the Senate over the next, decade, Michigan has to be almost like a guarantee for us. I mean, the seats we have to win to have a majority in the Senate are like in Iowa and Alaska and Ohio and places like that. And so if all this DSA type energy doesn't add up to victory in November, we're gonna have to have an even tougher conversation, I think. On the other hand, if it does, it validates the argument that they've been making, which is that these bolder policy stands will inspire people, et cetera. That they're just it kind of hasn't been tested in that type of environment yet.
No, I really appreciate that perspective. If you're just joining us, I'm Natalie Bencavanga. I'm here with Conor Lamb. He's an attorney and former representative here in Pennsylvania. Were you surprised to see how quickly Fetterman sort of shifted his views? In particular, the amount of energy that he has put towards critiquing his own party while also seeming to pander to the conservative base. I think a lot of people feel very betrayed by that. How did you feel having run that race and then watching it as, a citizen of Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I mean, even if I didn't do an amazing job, and we've talked about my sort of shortcomings in that campaign, I've always been proud that I did it because I do feel like I saw through that guy and I understood that he wasn't going to be good at the job. Now, I thought he was going to be bad for like totally different reasons. I didn't see this turn, so I was surprised and I have felt betrayed about it, just like everybody else did. Um, and I think it does kind of go to aspects of his character, which is he's always been this guy who wants to get attention and uh, sort of a lot of flash and no substance is an old saying people would used to have, but there's just not a record of accomplishment that he has to really anchor his views. So I think he kind of changes where he thinks the winds are blowing. If you read the reporting, it sounds like he has not kept up with the advice that his doctors gave him after the stroke. And, that may have led to the decline of his kind of overall faculties. I don't know. Um, so it's sad. And the part about it that bothers me is, a lot of things that he says about working with the other side and not letting partisanship kind of overwhelm your love of country and all that. Those are things that I've said too. And those are things that I believe in, but they're not credible when they are not backed up by action. And he is the laziest public servant I've ever seen. He's not a public servant, but he's the laziest elected official I've ever seen. He does not do anything. And that discredits, I think, those of us who would say, we have to find ways to kind of reach out and bridge some of these divides and whatnot. And that's a source of real frustration for me, I'll be honest. Yeah.
Yeah, when we look at that, to your point about working on across the aisle, so to speak, which I think traditionally was always a thing that, politicians had always tried to do, but it seems like it's becoming harder and harder to do that with this party of Trump that seems to back whatever he wants to do, regardless, I think, of how they really know it's going to, act out, including, of course, this war with Iran. Having a military background yourself, can you speak a little bit to what that experience would be like when you are in a party in opposition to the president and seeing people in that party that know better that still seem to be going along with basically, a nuclear explosion at the end of the day?
It's heartbreaking, especially if you're idealistic and if you're newer in your political career. I mean, that for me was what January 6th really was. I watched people that day, Republicans who I knew, who I'd been in, a bipartisan prayer breakfast with for a couple of years up to that point, just say and do things that I thought were so disgusting, which I think are going to be a black mark on their name for all history. But they do it because Trump is more popular than them, and they have given into this idea of his power. And it's the same thing on the war. It's the same thing on the tariffs. It's the same thing on so many where these guys know better. And the temptation is to say, okay, well, like screw them. That the whole bipartisan thing is over. On most things, Trump does make bipartisan work impossible. He just won't allow it. Where it does still occur is usually if you can find an issue that he doesn't care about. And again, just kind of speaking from my own experience, it's something that a lot of constituents want to see people try to still do, as hard and unlikely to succeed as it may be. So that's part of the tightrope that a lot of your elected legislators are walking every day.
Yeah, and speaking of which, as we're looking ahead, I think on this show, Facts Over Fear, what I've tried to do is share with people information so they can make up their own minds and strip away the fear mongering to get down to the facts of it. And the reality is, we are heading down the road to fascism. We are seeing the surveillance state picking up in unprecedented ways. And when you look at something like ICE that has gotten, more and more infusions of billions over billions of dollars while people are struggling to make ends meet. Did you ever think that you would see this in your lifetime? And as a father, as a participant in our community, what do you want to tell people in terms of where we go from here?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot in that question. I never thought I would see it, even when I was in Congress, but as
Mm.
pretty much as soon as Trump was running in 2024 and on his way to getting elected, I knew that's what was going to happen because of who he was aligning himself with and the way that he was talking about immigration. Um, and when they did that first budget and they gave ICE more money than like several militaries around the world have, and more than a lot of the rest of federal law enforcement have, that was a really clear signal to me that I don't think the public fully appreciated about what their intentions were and how far they intended to go. And there's still, I mean, it drops out of the news, but there's still such horrifying stories of what's happening to people who are detained in ICE detention today. There's one out about a green card holder. Again, like, so if you have a green card, obviously you didn't break the law, like you're
Right.
here legally. And that kind of stuff has continued to happen. And, it's a mixed bag because I'm always, that's one of the things that got me more involved speaking out these past 2 years. I feel like I'm not a lawyer worth any of the oaths I've taken to the
Mm.
Constitution if I don't, speak out on behalf of some of these people. Uh, it, but at the same time, I'm always so mystified as to why more people are not. But we've had a number of really courageous judges who make incredible rulings, and the Trump administration loses. And I mean, Abrego Garcia is the most visible, but you can always kind of come back to that one of like, wow, they had him in a jail that no one had ever gotten out of alive at the time that he was sent to it. That's the reality of that place in El Salvador.
Mm.
And today he's back with his family in the United States, and they've been able to defend him from deportation to Africa or wherever they wanted to send him. So there have been some successes, even as we are in this crazy descent that you described.
Yeah. And, I do a lot of interviews and I do a lot of independent reporting, Connor, and it's those little things, those moments of humanness and collective humanity that I hold on to because there is so much that can sort of, break your spirit. But I think at the end of the day, hope and finding ways to connect to one another, even if we're not going to agree on everything, is vital here in order to move us out of sort of this nightmare that we seem to be spiraling in. Speaking of which, let's talk a little bit about 2028 while I have you, and then I'm gonna let you go.
Speaking of nightmares, yeah.
If Fetterman decided to run again, would you consider throwing your hat back in the ring? I was reading some stuff recently where you were kind of alluding to, we'll see how, people feel if people are interested. Are you, though, interested in a career in politics at the end of the day? Is something that you still see for yourself in some capacity?
Yes, I mean, I ran for Congress the first time because I believed it was a public service, and I'm not saying that as like a talking point. I had spent my whole career in the Marine Corps, the Department of Justice. That was the way I thought. Like just try to do honest, good work for the public. Here's a seat in Congress where we need somebody to try to bring that attitude back.
Hmm.
If I could approach another position with that same spirit and think that I would be successful and that's kind of what people want to see out there. Remember, it's a democracy, so it's not just about any of us and the
Right.
the promotions and accolades we want. Like, how do the people want to be represented? That's kind of what I meant in that response that you're talking about. Then I of course would go for it. And for me, at least, it's not as simple as kind of getting a consultant and taking a poll and figure it out. Like I've spent the last year and a half now basically driving all over this state. And I've been to 35 counties and all these different events. And I just listen to people and I ask them what they think and what they're interested in seeing. And so from that, I'm sure I'm going to make a decision of some kind about how to get back involved. I'm just pretty open minded about what that's going to be.
No, I appreciate that. As we wrap up, and I'd love to have you back on more often to talk just about the issues of the day, because I feel like your perspective could be so valuable on just some of the news cycle from hell that I like to dive into on occasion with some of my regulars. Um, but as we look forward, beyond your own personal ambitions or dreams, I want to get into a dream space. And I've been trying to do this with guests because of this very reason of trying to look ahead and think about who we want to be. And when you think of Pennsylvania and the nation, you know, in its larger capacity, when you dream of it, what do you see in the next 5 years? What do you want to see for the people of this great country?
Yeah. Well, this is to go with the theme. I think this is something where if you asked me in 2018 and asked me today, I would give you pretty different answers.
Mm,
Not because my view on the issues have changed, but I just think the urgency of some of the problems have become more apparent to me. I would have answered in a very policy focused way, I think a few years ago about energy and jobs and the middle class and stuff, which all of which is super important. But now, to me, the number one is this tearing of the social fabric that we've experienced over a long period of time, not just in the Trump years, the way people spend so much time alone, in front of their screens on social media, not with each other, not sort of bridging the divides that exist between communities and races and religions and all that kind of stuff. And it makes it, I think it's going to make it almost impossible for us to do public policy in a significant way across issues because we're so estranged from each other. And I see AI as accelerating that process in a negative way. And so I think if I'm looking to the future and trying to think about how things could be better for my kids, for other people's kids, it'd be more cultural where we could somehow restore a culture of being able to deliberate politically in public together, discuss things, relate to each other, see across differences, just spend time together. I mean, think about how basic that is, but how
yeah.
necessary it is. Those are the kind of things that I would start with probably before I would even talk about how that plays out in like a policy way.
I love that. And I appreciate you chatting with me and sharing your own experience and your evolution and being willing to be honest and vulnerable about the things that matter to you. If people want to learn more about what you're doing and what you're up to these days, you have a huge Substack platform, by the way. Where can people go and check out more of your work?
Yeah, just my name on Substack, Conor, Conor Lamb. And I did put one out yesterday or today that I call it the Essential Facts 2026 midterm edition. I also get overwhelmed by how ridiculous the sort of media climate is. And one thing I find really helpful is to just keep my eye on a list of facts that seem significant in politics and not changing every day. And it kind of helps me consume the news then on a day to day basis. So I shared that list with people. It's a free post. You can go find it if you're interested. And yeah, follow me if you'd like to read more.
Thank you so much. Thank you to everybody who joined. I know there were so many comments and they were all very nice, and I appreciate everyone. I just wanted to make sure I could get to as many questions as I could, but I'd love to have you back, Conor, and to talk more about all of the things happening and what matters to the people of Pennsylvania and beyond. And as always, everyone, until next time, please take care of yourselves and each other. Thank you.